You're listening to World of Empowerment Radio, your station for practical spirituality in a changing world. And here are your hosts, Aingeal Rose and Ahonu.
Hi, I am Ahonu, and you're very welcome to our World of Empowerment podcast. Several months ago, I think in January 2024, we interviewed Teon in an episode called Your Heart is a Portal. And that was unveiling the mysteries of manifestation. And in that session, Teon shared his personal journey of how he was acclimatizing to the energies of Sedona and manifested his dream home and so on. Now that has all advanced, and Teon is going to be sharing with us some amazing information today where we're going to be talking about the new earth. But before we get into that, I just want to share our own understanding of the new earth, because we get a lot of people who are asking us all the time, what is the new earth? What does it involve? What do I have to do? Am I ready? Is the world ready? All those kinds of things. And Teon is going to be sharing some really amazing experiences that he wants to share with us today, and that we're delighted also to share with you. So with that, let us introduce Teon Lucas. Teon, you're very welcome again.
Thank you, Ahonu. Good to see you again.
Sure.
So I'm here based in Sedona, and I've been working with Ahonu and Aingeal. I'll be putting a book out shortly. I think the new title may be This is Awakening, and I hope to describe in detail how the architecture of consciousness works and how to use it in a new way to be embodied and present in the new reality, as we're talking about New Earth today, in New Earth.
Yeah. And can I just add to that, Teon, because we're very privileged to be working with Teon in terms of publishing this book. And from time to time, he shares with us the developments as it's ongoing. And I have to say, it is very reassuring, because many people I know from the questions we get asked, Teon, the questions are like, what do I have to do? Do I have to change? Do I have to, become a guru? Do I have to practice meditation? And all of these kinds of questions are answered. And some of them, indeed, we will get to cover today as well. And it's not that difficult. Am I right in saying that, Teon?
Yes, it's a change where you have to move more into your heart and unlearn a lot of things. But because it's more focused on embodying, it's not that difficult, because you're embodying levels of you that have more intelligence and perspective than you have.
So let's get into the first question that we want to ask you today, Teon, and that is more or less about the last time we spoke, when we were doing the Heart Portal podcast. And do you want to summarize what we covered and what we shared in that episode?
Yeah, so for those of you who didn't watch that one, I described how manifesting works, where really you take things that already exist or that you formed in the inner planes, in the higher realms, and you're going to be bringing them, dropping them down, and feeling them in your heart with desire and aliveness. And that's basically taking the blueprint of something that exists in energy and in consciousness and bringing it out into physical reality. So you're connecting them with your heart as the portal that you bring the within the inner realms and without physical reality. You bring it through that doorway of within to without.
Yeah. Now, we are going to post a link to that episode down below, because that was, I consider, a life-changing episode, because it basically introduced that new earth concept, but introduced it in a way that was coming from the heart. And we encourage people to watch that. Now, what has changed, though, recently? What has changed for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. So it really has to do with embodying and stepping into what one would call New Earth. So before, when I was presenting about how you use the planes of existence, there's the astral plane, which is your light body, the causal plane, which is your presence, that's the energy of truth. We were sort of like popping open a little window for a moment with causal presence to go, oh, let me see clearly what to create, or let me get in touch with what I want. But it's still sort of like a mental process where you're like going, oh, let me make room for the new reality by viewing it. Like I'm over here in the old reality. I'm the version that's not yet in New Earth. And I need to peer into New Earth, peer into the inner planes, the astral with all its energy and possibility and magnetism, causal, where I can feel what is it that's right for me? Because each of us is our own unique expression of everything. And in doing so, we get clear and aligned, and it also helps align the creation. But we're kind of looking at it just like a peek into something for that moment I'm bringing something through, not what's now happening, which is an entire process to move into that world instead of just accessing.
Yeah. Now, we understand that, having worked with you consistently over the last long while, what though, it in that general description, it sounds like it's a difficult process for people. So can you tell us, like, what's it like experiencing that new reality that you've just described?
So actually, it's less work than one might realize. The more you've done enough desire within your heart and wanting to get into the new reality, it becomes more of a surrender and letting go. So I didn't know that on Monday I would be moving into New Earth, but I was talking with a friend of mine. We were going to play with energies because I'm meeting more people that want to be in the higher frequencies, right? I was talking with this lady, and we were going to just meet and play with the energies of consciousness and what's possible when it's more fluid. And, you know, my higher self had its own agenda for what this week was. It was Monday, July 8th. And what happened was each chakra, one at a time, went into on its own. Like it just started happening, went into
Well,
complete stillness.
before you describe that, let me just
Yes,
paint the picture for our
yes.
viewers and our listeners, Teon, because it was classic. We were in Phoenix in, I don't know, 119-degree heat. And I got this text message that said, from Teon, that said, I've just moved into the new earth. And like, and really, I reacted very positively to that. I thought that was absolutely wonderful because with all the discussions that we've had with people over the last few years, kind of building up as a crescendo to this time period now, it always was the feeling as if, new earth were somewhere out there into the future. And here you were declaring, I've just moved into the new earth now. And that was on Monday. So tell us about that experience.
Yes. So on Monday, what happened was it started with the root chakra, and my root chakra went to complete stillness. And then it felt anchored down into the earth very, very strongly. And so I'm just like sitting there, and my friend's sitting there, like, okay, I'm feeling that too. And there's no words for it because there's complete stillness. And then it spent a few minutes on that chakra, and then you could just feel sort of like loosen up. And then it went to the next one, to the sacral chakra. Did the same thing. That one didn't anchor down quite as strongly, but similarly, stillness, equally strong stillness, and a fair degree of rooting down. And then it went to solar plexus, went to the heart, and so on. It went all the way up. When it got to the top of the head, third eye and crown, I could feel like not only was it going into stillness and switching or reworking, but it was like there's all these connections being redone. Like here is my viewpoint in the old reality, and now that has to be put in stillness, moved over to the new reality energy, and then rewired, connected back in. So our bodies are appearing here in layers. There's layers of experience, layers, 7 layers that we materialize into to put our full, spiritual, mental, emotional body online in the physical experience. And I was basically being relocated 1 layer at a time over into the new reality.
And is that something that, I mean, the way you described it to me that day, last Monday, was it seemed to be a very simple process. And can you, like, does one need yogic experience or any kind of spiritual background in order to be able to practice what you've just described there?
Um, you don't need a background in it, but I did have to sit in my heart and allow it. I needed to breathe, relax, and allow it. So I had been preparing or wanting or desiring this. So I don't know if the timeline when other people switch is based on how much they've spent time in the higher frequencies, that their cells are and their chakras seem kind of acclimated and ready. They don't have any major blocks to it happening. Because you could use your will and say, no, not yet, right? And I was ready.
Yeah,
I was inviting it. I was ready to play in those new energies. And the way the universe was giving me that experience was going, here you go.
yeah.
Here's the reality in which you can play in the higher, less linear, more fluid experience.
So do you believe, Teon, that it is a choice, really? When you said, like, I'm choosing not to block it. So you're effectively making a choice to move into a new earth, as opposed to making a choice to say, no, I want the conflict and I want the politics
Yeah,
and I want the drama.
exactly. We really create our own realities. And there's some orientation to really knowing I want to be in my heart and I want to be in something where everything's taken care of and it's easy. And I focus more on feelings and joy to create.
Mhm.
That's
Yeah.
that's a big shift from if I really want to be in my mind and I want to control everything, then I can't necessarily have all my chakras moved into a reality that's heart-based, higher frequency.
And let me just go back to where we just started with this when we were talking about the heart-based manifesting, the last interview we did.
Yes.
So, does this new experience change how you manifest now?
Yes, it does, because what I had to do, so I'll tell you a little bit more about what happened the following days. It took a lot to integrate this. So moving your reality into a new reality isn't like just one and done in 2 hours, right? Now the rest of my system has to acclimate to operating in that reality. And I would go to work, and then during lunchtime, I had like an hour off or something. I spent all of that pretty much lying down, just being out of it, watching in inner space as things are shifting. And that happened several days in a row because everything in my experience has to get rewired or remapped over to this new reality. So it's kind of like, well, I move myself in there, but I need to move my experiences, my relationships, my connections. Everything has to go into that new format. And it's a lot to move,
Yes,
to
yes.
reshape.
And when you say move into a new reality, like, is there any sense of loss? Now, it's a leading question in the sense that, do you feel that, oh, I should have stayed in the old reality, or, what about my possessions and what about my family? And do you know what I'm asking you?
Um, I did not notice any loss because it was additive, right? You're going to a new frequency. It's just a different lens and a way to flow through life,
Okay, gotcha.
right? So
Yeah.
now the difference might be that there could be loss. In my case, I have a fairly simple, not too many friends, not too many connections life already, because I'm ready to surround myself with people that want to be in a new reality.
Mhm.
Okay. So if you've already prepared that, but like with any other spiritual awakening, if it's a significant awakening or change, you may feel like a different version of you, and there can be a lot for others to
Yes.
acclimate to, wait, you're just not the same anymore. But that's no
Yes.
different than an awakening experience.
Yeah, because we've had many people report to us when they do make this choice, they report that, oh, I'm not on the same wavelength as my family anymore, and I've some other friends have just walked away from me. And now that's the way I was asking you about, do you feel that sense of loss? But in some ways, I guess it's not loss. It's just that, like you said, it's a different experience, an experience that you are wanting to imbibe in a new higher frequency. And it's like as if people in that old frequency don't know how to engage it, or don't know how to enjoy it, or are not willing to even
Yeah,
go there.
it does have a lot to do with enjoyment. So this was the lesson I learned during the week as I'm making this switch to just transitioning to now I'm actually in it. How do I operate differently? And what's happening was my first experience was my parts of me that had been struggling with who am I and what is my life about in this new reality, in this new energy, right? What's important? What are my priorities? Parts of me were more mental focused and I call them like protectors. They're like, here's what you should do, here's what you shouldn't do, kind of. That would be my relationship with those inner parts of me. And what was happening was the ones that were, oh, be cautious, don't go to high energy, what's going to happen kind of thing, they used to be able to shut down the resonance or energy flow in my body. I had one that's in my sacral chakra, and it felt like, oh, it could at any point kind of stop the flow of energy in my nervous system or trigger me. And then I wouldn't feel as much of my higher frequency flowing, right?
Mm. Yeah.
Once I was moved into the layer by layer, chakra by chakra, it's kind of like that same dynamic was no longer available. It was like connected into new anchor points of energy. And I would have a feeling of like, oh, hold back, and nothing would happen. I would just stay in the high frequency in the same resonance. So
Mm.
we've often thought about things of like, okay, this is our inner work, things we have to work on. And that itself, that viewpoint of a work-oriented focus on the problem or focus on the healing, has to change if you want to stay in New Earth. Because
Right.
if you keep focusing on the problem, you're focusing your mind, funneling everything through your mind, and you're focused on the lower energies.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
If I
I
move
wanted
into
you
my
to,
heart, yes.
Mhm.
If I move into my heart,
Yeah,
right? It's a different experience altogether. Go ahead.
I wanted you to explain that because in some ways what you're describing is like ultra serious, you know? What I mean is in terms of our evolution and our desire to increase in frequency and to go home to God effectively. And I regard that as pretty serious. But yet you've mentioned that you had to focus on fun. So how do you like, can you explain how all of this is fun for you or for anybody?
Yeah, so really what it is I was hyper responsible, right? So I basically have my mind or whatever had my mind in charge of or leading. So I would think about, well, I've got my book coming out, I've got awakening, I have access to all this consciousness. I'm supposed to make sure that comes out to the world and all my brothers and sisters on the planet, that I help them awaken from a sense of responsibility. And
Mhm.
that's where it falls flat because you can get a certain distance there. You can bring through techniques and practices and so on. But fun is actually, and joy, Ananda, right, is actually an attribute of being a creator. So in the
Right.
Sanskrit, they have a thing called Sat Chit Ananda. Sat Chit Ananda means Sat is I exist. So you start from recognizing that you exist. Even though I'm in a movie simulation of the Matrix, I also have the attribute of I exist, and that transcends out of the simulation. Chit means I'm made of consciousness. We're all pieces of consciousness. That means that whatever's going on in my reality can be reshaped by my very consciousness. I can know things because I'm made of consciousness. Consciousness feels everything, so therefore knows everything, because it's literally feeling everything going on simultaneously all at once, and reshapes things because it's fluid, and my intention and my thoughts change what shape I have in consciousness, which is why focus is so important on joy, because Ananda, that last one, is eternal joy.
Right. Now, is it possible, Teon, that fear might block any of that process? And specifically, I'm talking about this time period where we're in. And many of our viewers and our listeners would also be aware that there's talk about, oh, some big event happening in the fifth on the 15th of July and all kinds of negativity happening. Like to enter into that thought process or to entertain fear, would it block the heart process that you're describing now?
Um, it would. So really the way I see it, this kind of brings us around to the concept of how is New Earth showing up now on the timeline, right? And I'd like to take a moment to talk a bit about the yugas. So
Sure.
in Sri Yukteswar's book, he maps it out. And what I've done here in the yuga diagram is I've taken a picture of the 24 millennia cycle that the solar system orbits through the universe. Every 24 millennia, it does a full rotation. And as we move from the farthest point, which we were in not that long ago, a few hundred years ago, right? As we move from that farthest point on into the Dwapara Yuga, the one we're in, it raises man's consciousness. This is the one we're in right now is focused on mental development. So not everyone riding the current trend of mental development, that's kind of the common denominator of where everyone's at, will advance to the next era. The next era, the Treta one, is where everyone will be able to discern divine magnetism, the spiritual nature of things, moving out of fear paradigms, moving out of all that. But while you're still back developing the mental paradigm, you might still associate with fear. It's a completely valid option, right? And so what
Mm.
New Earth is doing is it's allowing us to skip forward about 2,500 years from we're just into Dwapara into Treta. And in Treta, 2,500 years from now, we're not going to be going, oh, some people are still in fear, because everyone will be able to perceive divine magnetism. So it'll be the operating principle, right?
Right. Right.
And so then you might ask, like, well, why are we trying to skip forward? Because we don't want to just cycle through where we go to the nearest point and into enlightenment and then all the way back into darkness again. So to break
Yes.
the cycle, New Earth has been brought here, and it's an opportunity to move to more of a astral level consciousness with instant manifestation, where things are orchestrated, where things are taken care of. It's really just a skip ahead in time of 2,500
Mm.
years.
So is
So
that does that explain the experience that many people report of time speeding up? They have this sensation that, they're skipping forward somehow.
yeah. So the frequency of time is very different as we go to closer to that nearest point, as the orbit would go all the way around 12,000 years, all the way into the nearest point of fully enlightened. Right?
Yes.
And so there's a speeding up that's happening because we are accelerating the frequency and opening a, a new energy model of here's Earth in astral. Here's Earth where we've taken the inner planes of causal and astral and just sort of made a new model that has all of that available and making that available easily 2,500 years early.
And I know that from my own experiences that I studied with Maharishi Mahesh Yoga in the TM movement many years ago. And he he was a great teacher of the fact that when one practices something of this nature, that it kind of is exponential, that your own family will benefit from what you're doing, and maybe the neighborhood, and then the community and the city, and the more people who would raise their frequency in this way, the more would benefit. Is that the same with what you've just described, Teon, where like you've moved into the new earth? So is it possible that perhaps your neighbors and friends and whatever would also move with that frequency and so on, expand it outwards so that the whole world benefits ultimately? Is that the case?
It's definitely how change happens is someone goes first, some number of people. I have a number of friends that are in this other frequency that I've been meeting. And that makes a pathway so it's easier to follow because we do things by example. So if I go, oh, show me what it's like, and I see an example of someone, I can get it on a cellular level energetically. Oh, that's what that feels like to do. But if no one has
Mhm.
ever done that before, if it's not an idea that, oh, we have electricity and we have mobile phones and, there's spiritual awake people, if we go back to when that wasn't a concept, it would be very shocking, rare, or hard to believe if someone showed up from the future 1,000 years ago with a mobile phone saying, I'm spiritually awake. Just think
Yeah,
about it, right? So the fact that
yeah,
it's normal and that we have things that help us understand what it is makes it an option. In terms of benefit to all, I'm starting to see that reality is a customizable framework. Means each one of us get to tailor our focus, what it means, and what's important to us to our own, soul essence or preference, how we want to live our life. So I'm not saying, oh, I expect everyone, or even it makes sense that everyone should suddenly be trying to jump 2,500 years ahead, right? There's many
yeah,
that may have come here and want to experience just what it's like going through a life doing Dwapara Yuga development of mental capabilities. There's
yes,
nothing wrong with that. We learn things in layers and you know, in a
yeah,
spiral, an upward spiral of things.
yes,
So,
yes.
so if people want to move into a new frequency, it's now more available and there'll be more examples. And the more people that go, the less effort it'll take, the more natural it'll be, the less turbulent or disruptive it'll be.
Beautiful. Now, I have a question, and it's in connection with the yoga map that you have there. And you know how we, well, especially lately in the last number of years, we've been more exposed to the idea that we're not alone in the universe, that there's multiple or perhaps endless, who knows, other beings visiting and all of that kind of thing going back through the millennia. Now, my own feeling about all of that is, well, of course, if you watch programs on TV, not that we do a lot, but the likes of Ancient Aliens and so on, and they never arrive at any conclusion about whether aliens have been to Earth in the past. But they do leave it open to say, is it possible that, we've been visited? Is it possible, so they leave these open questions, never concluding anything. But when I look at your yoga map that you have there, and you're looking at, like, gosh, you're looking at sections of 12,000 years at a time. You're probably looking at millennia of time, really. So somebody must have experienced all of that time before in order for you to be able to present a map like that.
Oh, for
So
sure.
are
Yeah.
you are
So,
you
so
effectively
the,
saying
the
that
map
other
is
beings have
showing,
experienced?
yeah, the map is just showing here's what would happen if we weren't trying to evolve Earth to a next level paradigm. This is just how the clock would roll around. And that does mean that if we go back 12,000 years, there are advanced beings that were here on Earth that were aware
Yes,
of everything possible in spiritual potential, right? And
yes,
that also means if we go back 24,000 years or whatever, similar to where we are now. Like it was just cycling, cycling. But
yes,
um, the more we move into the paradigm where consciousness is causal plane, astral plane, and you're made of consciousness and you exist, you can customize all of that. So time is actually more fluid. You don't have to just look at it the way it runs linearly on the clock, right? I'm made of
uh,
chakras. I'm made of koshas, the different layers that make up the dense matter around the atom. I'm made up of tattvas, the different five electricities and the root causes of creation. Everything's made up of layers made out of consciousness. And in the inner planes, those are time free. So if I'm going inward and just feeling what I'm excited about, right? All of that, those layers can reshape to form that experience with all of the higher intelligence that they're made of that can
right.
form whatever I want. So I don't have to go, oh, well, time goes this way, therefore I have to wait. Or aliens visited 12,000 years ago. I don't have to reference time that way. I can connect
Gotcha.
to those consciousnesses and those frequencies right now and create what I want
Yes,
to have.
that makes sense. Yeah. And when you used the term reshape, can you explain that a little bit more so that I understand it?
If I talk about Sat Chit Ananda, Chit is consciousness. Consciousness is fluid and it forms based on ideas. So we're all made up of this reshapeable fluid substance that feels things. And then if I decide, okay, I want to be awakened and I want more of that, then my consciousness, my energy field, and the pathways I'm forming that instruct how my reality goes are going to be more directed towards that kind of experience. And my inner intelligence will bring and present more of that experience to me. If I want my world to be very fixed and I'm like, I don't like any of this, I'm scared of it, then consciousness can be made crystallized to be so fixed and rigid, it seems like there are no awake people.
Okay.
After I
Yeah.
die, there'll be nothing. Like it's just reshapeable depending on how you want it to go.
Mhm.
And yeah,
Here's another question now, and again, looking at the yoga map that you have, and moving from Kali Yuga into Dwapari and Treta. So it looks like it goes through the Virgo, Leo, and Cancer, and maybe even into Gemini. So for somebody who is interested in horoscopes or in their birth month, what would they find it easier? You know, if somebody was a Leo or a Cancer, would they find it easier to do what you're describing now in terms of reshaping the chakras, or does it matter?
I don't think we call those different eras like the age of Aquarius. Those are different ages, right? And that
Yes.
has a certain energy consciousness to it. But all of this is happening in creation together, forming our experience. There's just certain ones
Okay.
highlighted. This is a certain time that highlights that, right? So I don't think there's any constraint or there's so much going on with really has more to do with your personal focus and what you want and
Right.
desire. And
Yeah.
all of that is a resource to support you. So I think of it more as like reality's here and it's a resource and a framework and it's here to support you. And so you can align with it in an infinite number of ways. There isn't really a single way to do, oh, well, then this determines this. It's not like that. What
Yeah.
your heart desires is the energy of bliss, which creates the entire universe. So when you start to connect more with your happiness and focus on, I find this fun, and you're willing to spend time
Mhm.
feeling what's fun, focusing on what's fun, being
Yes.
playful, right? You can have any outcome you want. It's not really defined by any of the things you're made of.
Yes. Wow, that makes a lot of sense. Now, I spoke about fear earlier, Teon, and I'm asking these kinds of questions because also they're the kinds of questions that people ask us, and they do need answers to these kinds of fear-based questions, especially on the 3D world when we hear of potential World War III and escalation of violence and so on. So, on that level, now I know I'm backtracking here and we're not talking about fun right now, but for somebody who is wondering about how, like, the fear-based experiences that they're having, how do they stop that? Like, is there something that they can do? Or how do they know that they have or that they are moving into the uh, the next dimension, the new Earth? How do they know that? Will they see it on the news that, oh, such and such a war was averted? And
No,
do you understand my
see,
question? I know it's
see, if you look at it this way, there's 7 billion people on the planet,
mhm,
or 8 billion, something like that. Of the 8 billion, the majority of them may take 2,500 years to move out of that fear paradigm,
Okay.
right? So what
Yes.
we do is we just recognize that's what's happening. That's how the school of Earth is playing out in its current trajectory. Now, maybe 100 million will go, I want to go into New Earth, and they will start showing new possibilities. And anyone who's inspired will start to surround themselves with friends and connections to move more into that. You do that by who do you surround yourself with? What's important to you? How do you organize and shape your life? What
Yes.
what calls you each day? How much time do you spend soaking in fun versus worrying and watching the news? Yeah,
Yes.
it's perfectly okay that it takes 2,500 years to get there. There's no judgment.
Gotcha. Yeah. No, I'm glad you answered that question. And I'm glad I asked it actually, because I do know that it can be difficult to explain that. And you explained it so succinctly and so beautifully. And would I be right in saying that part of that feeling and part of that heart experience is where everything flows much easier? You mentioned flow earlier on. And let me give an example from our own experiences. We're moving house right now at the moment, and we're finding that everything about it is just flowing so effortlessly. There's no difficulties at all. There's no negatives attached to it. And I'm feeling that this is kind of a meant to be idea. Does that flow with what you're describing also?
Yeah.
Synchronicities, coincidences,
Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
opportunity.
Exactly. And so as you're moving more into this new paradigm, flow is super important because what you're saying is I'll focus on my own happiness. I'll allow my energy to charge up and vibrate at a higher frequency. And that itself will draw to it the synchronicities and flow. So
Right.
it's a redirection to, am I keeping my container full? Am I having fun? Am I being playful? And then everything just happens automatically.
Yeah, that's certainly our experience, and clearly your experience as well. Okay. So
Yeah.
is there anything you want to add that would help people? I mean, I know people will want to get in touch with you, Teon, and will want to learn more about what you've experienced as well. So is there anything that we need to know?
So I do have, for those who really want to get into New Earth or higher frequency consciousness, um, I do have a mastermind group, Sedona Multidimensionals on Meetup, and we play with these consciousnesses weekly. Um, and then other than that, my book will come out after I have enough time having fun and enjoying these new energies. I'll let that inspire the completion of the book.
Great. Okay. Well, we'll put the link up to the Sedona Mastermind, of which we participate ourselves, which is absolutely wonderful, and also the book also when it comes out. So we look forward to that immensely, and we do feel that the timing. And now I know we're going back to the earthly experience of time, but that the timing of that also is perfect. Great. Okay.
Yes.
Well, Tian, it's been a pleasure as always, and we will share these links, and we look forward to our continuing experience of the mastermind every month, even though we're moving to Prescott, but nonetheless, we're not a million miles away. So we
Excellent.
look forward to that. Great. Tian, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
You have been listening to Aingeal Rose Ahonu on World of Empowerment Radio, your station for practical spirituality in a changing world.